On tonight's edition of the CHGO Cubs Related podcast, pitchers and catchers have reported the first full squad workout is just days away, and we will get you ready with storylines and things to watch all through spring training on tonight's edition of the CHGO Cubs Related podcast. This is the CHGO Cubs Related podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined as always by Brendan. We are coming to you on February 12th. Brendan, pitchers and catchers have reported, a lot of the position players as well. But I think more importantly, do you want to be my Valentine, or what's the vibe there?
Oh my gosh. This is just to take a step back. We have Dansby Swanson Valentine cards coming out from Major League Baseball. Dansby's getting a lot of national time. The Cubs are getting a lot of national time with the World Baseball Classic.
Yeah.
I haven't felt this way in terms of hype for a season, player recognition. You know where I'm going with this. I haven't felt this way in like 10 years, where you have so much accolades and love coming our way.
Well, and I think it's fair. This certainly isn't the best team, at least going into the season on paper, that you and I have discussed in our decade plus now of doing a podcast together. But it has been a while since we talked about a team that had these expectations and felt as complete of a roster. And again, not perfect, right? But it's been a while since we've gone into a spring training camp with these types of expectations. And I think a higher standard that we are going into it expecting the team to meet.
Yeah, I mean, from the last 5 years, you look at just the holes we've had to discuss, them filling across the diamond, third base, first base for multiple years since they traded Rizzo and KB. Now the discussion is, well, should Michael Busch bat leadoff or cleanup? Should Matt Shaw play a little bit of third base so Bregman can play DH? It's a very different conversation where now the attention is shifted to who's filling out the 25th and 26th spots. These are conversations we frankly have not had in 8 years. It's an unfamiliar yet historically familiar place to be in.
Yeah. So setting the table for this episode, want to talk about, kind of like we did last week, our episode last Thursday, we kind of looked at storylines to follow on the pitching staff. Brendan also followed that up with a really nice, I think it was 22 tweet thread.
Yeah.
Is that your longest?
It's up there. Okay.
So if you're interested in some trends, there's graphs, there's pictures, there's.
Did you read every single tweet? Every one of those 22 pictures?
Sure, I did.
Did you take notes? I know you got your notepad in front of you.
I read it in bed every night. But if you want to check out more of that, our episode talks about that. And then, of course, Brendan goes into some detail over on social. On this episode, similar, but taking a look at the position players and, diving into, again, just kind of as the first full squad workout is around the corner, games are around the corner, just kind of what to keep your eye on, things to watch for. But before we jump into that, Brendan, I'll start with a good comment from Mike G15 in our YouTube chat. I think I speak for everyone when I say the Nationals should name Miles Mikolas, who they just brought in, their opening day starter at historic Wrigley Field. I got to tell you, I think that's a Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken, at 1:20. It'll be a cool April day. There is nothing that gets the vibe started on a Cubs regular season than if they put Miles on the mound against that team. That would be an excellent way to start the year.
You know what I'm proud of? I never figured out how to say his last name properly. All those years, I still don't know if it's Michaelis or Mikolas, and I love that about us.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. And was he the one?
I used to say it was because he was a Cardinal that nobody cares. But
no, I just don't like the guy.
He's a former Cardinal. So
was he the one who threw at Ian Happ? That was Michaelis, right?
Yes.
So let's have Ian Happ bat lead off
After the backswing, is that what you're talking about?
After the backswing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's have Ian Happ bat lead off to start the season. Happ goes yard just like his 2018 again, and we get this year going.
Deal. Works
Done.
for me. I'll be there at beautiful historic Wrigley Field. I'll take the day off work. Yeah. Sounds great. Sounds great. 8 runs off of Miles would keep all of us warm, assuming it's going to be like 45 degrees. But let's jump into it. I think before we get into maybe some of the position player storylines, we're definitely going to talk about Alex Bregman. There was a really great piece from The Athletic, and Ken Rosenthal already kind of, if you've been listening to us, you already know that Brendan and I read that piece and we're like, I very easily could have walked down the street to like Wrigleyville Sports and just picked up as much Alex Bregman merch. I was fired up reading it. But I just want to start now they're officially there. We're seeing footage, we're seeing workouts, we're hearing from the players. Anything jump out to you from these kind of like first couple days of everybody officially being there?
We'll get into it, but I think we've heard several times now Pete Crow-Armstrong talk about chase. And I think that's a theme of this show, chase, and growing as a player. And to your point about the Bregman piece, a lot of attention to leadership and veteran leadership and knowledge. That seems to be the one big takeaway so far in the first few days.
Yeah, more than anything, it's just been fun to see them back there. I love watching that footage, seeing some of the new faces, Bregman, Cabrera, getting out there, getting their work in. But yeah, I'm just thrilled. And as you said, I think it's not specific to them being there, but I do think the most exciting thing for me is it does feel like there's a different energy around this team, not just from them, but from the way the league itself and people around the league are talking about them. And, look, sometimes teams don't meet those expectations, but it's nice to have them. This team has expectations, Pacoda projections. I think yesterday, putting the Cubs, I think handily ahead in the division. Now, whatever you make of those, it's up to you. We've certainly been on here yelling about them in the past, so I'm not going to, when they fit my narrative, I think it's a great
They're
system.
the best projection system in the world. Way better than Fangraphs.
But yeah, like I do think like those expectations are there, and I'm excited that feels to be the energy this time, not necessarily as in years past where it was like, well, if this team outperforms their expectations and they get a jump from 8 different guys, it feels like, no, like they take the field on paper, like they have those expectations and they should be able to meet them. So that's been the most exciting thing for me. But I do want to jump into the position players, what's going on in spring training. And I want to talk about Alex Bregman. And this segment is going to be sponsored by Game Day Men's Health. Better father, better husband, better man. Go to Game Day Men's Health. Visit GameDayCHGO.com to find locations closest to you. And Alex Bregman already is our Game Day Men's Health difference maker. So we talked about this before they signed him, when they signed him, after they signed him. But even just getting these early returns for, he's been in Mesa for what, a couple weeks, maybe less, a week and a half, something like that.
A week at most.
Like, getting a piece like this, if you didn't read the piece, we'll give you some of the highlights, but it was a very
Corey
good piece.
will read the entire thing word for
on
word
air.
like
Yeah.
3rd grade.
I think that's legal, right?
Better.
But, well, I'll popcorn to you. Over at The Athletic from Ken Rosenthal, and it just kind of going through the clubhouse presence and the leadership from Alex Bregman. And what is really amazing, and we heard this from Jed, I think, and Craig Counsell when he first signed, about him like calling the minor league coordinators and wanting to get scouting reports on everybody and learn the language of the organization so that he could communicate with everybody. But like reading this article too, already there's anecdotes of him talking to Hobie Milner and telling him offhand, no notes, no iPad, no anything, just like, hey man, like we had a couple, tips on you last year. Like, here's what you were doing. You were tipping some of your pitches. And Milner said he knew about one of them, but another one he hadn't heard of yet. And, talking to Matthew Boyd, talking to Phil Maton, like, I'm going to get that Matone. I don't know.
Maton.
That's what I said. Sort of what I said.
It was kind of in between, but that's okay.
Phil Maton. Again, like just tips and things that he sees on them, scouting reports, and it's a really fascinating piece. The Milner one in particular, I loved. Like, of course, he could have looked it up beforehand, but like
No.
Hobie was explaining
That's
it, that
not.
it's like,
That's not
listen,
what
he just
happened.
walked up to me and was talking about like,
That's not
he
what
doesn't,
happened.
of course, he doesn't go into specifically what it was. They don't want to tell us that,
Of
but
course.
I'm just envisioning him going up, like being like, hey man, like last July, you're doing a thing with your hip when you're throwing a curveball, whatever. And, him being like, why did he remember that? He just knows this off the top of his head. It's a really great piece, and it speaks to what he's bringing to this clubhouse. I want to talk about the PCA section of it.
We'll get into it
Specifically. But Brendan, I mean, one of the things that stands out about this is not just that this presence matters. I don't want to like overhype his mentorship or leadership or whatever. But what really stands out to me is not just that he's bringing this desire to make everyone around him better and study the game and study how they can get better, but specifically at this time for this team, a team that after years of not making the playoffs, winning 83 games, finally gets back to the playoffs. They knock over some of the hurdles, but not all of them, right? They didn't win the division. They didn't win a pennant. They didn't win the World Series. Bringing in a guy like this to help a group that has so many young players and budding potential stars, to guide them with his experience to that next level. I think the timing of bringing him in addition to his value, it just feels so good reading this stuff and having him here.
No doubt. And you talked about, well, he may have looked it up when he was talking to Hobie Milner. It's not the case. Like, how you and I talk about 2003, 2004 relievers, Michael Wirtz, Remlinger, Scott Ear, Bob
I would have bet a lot
Howry.
of money I was not going to hear those names today, but okay.
But those are the things that like naturally come to our mind. It's because we're obsessed about the Cubs. Alex Bregman's obsessed about baseball. It just happens to come to his mind, and it's why he remembers it. He loves the game so much. He's so in tune with the game so much that he doesn't have to look it up. He can just unprompted talk about what he may have remembered 2 years ago because it's driven by that love.
Yeah.
That's why, as a fan, I gravitate towards those players the most. There's a reason why a large sect of fans did not gravitate towards past Cubs players such as Kyle Tucker. And it's not to, nag on Kyle Tucker, but fans can recognize when certain players exude a type of familiar fandom for the sport. And that's what Alex Bregman does bring. And to your point, do you want to hype this up and overhype the value of that and the leadership? Who knows? It's always difficult to fully understand what the value of that leadership is. Nevertheless, from a fan's point of view, we get to talk about Alex Bregman and what he sees. That's an interesting storyline. We get to see what he's working on with other young guys like Pete Crow-Armstrong. That's fun to talk about. We sometimes don't get that with other superstars. With Alex Bregman, you do get that.
Yeah, it's a great point about, whether we know it or not, but that sort of perception that the fans can pick up on about a guy's desire and that kind of burning flame. It doesn't mean that guys don't have it, but when fans can sense it,
right? When they can express it.
Like, I mean, even thinking of someone like Javi, right? Like seeing
100%.
his daily like commitment to selling out and doing everything he can to win, and that passion, it connects with
my
the fans.
favorite Javi moment among several moments was when he was celebrating in the clubhouse and he was dancing or something like that. He stops. He's like, all I do is baseball. I'm like, oh, that's kind of like what you and I do. Like, all I do is baseball. And I relate to that. And those are the guys that I remember the most.
You don't love the game enough to get the logo tattooed on your back, though, do you?
I mean, I'll do it. I got to listen. Listen.
I'm just saying.
Hold on. You see that? So just saying, dude. Just saying. Touche.
Touche. I literally touche. I forgot about that. Yeah. If you're listening on your podcast feed, Brendan has the Cubs W tattooed on one of his fingers.
That's right.
That is a real thing.
I'm a sick person.
So we're going to hit our first ad break in a second here, but I want to finish before we get into the PCA conversation with Alex Bregman and talking about some of our storylines for the season as they pair together, PCA being one of them. I want to finish the conversation just on that like leadership and stuff from Bregman with the anecdote involving Jameson Taillon at the end of this Ken Rosenthal piece. So again, I don't want to hype up his value in the clubhouse and how much that matters too much, though. If you go back to like Anthony Rizzo talking about John Lester, David Ross, John Lackey, it certainly sounds like it matters a lot to these teams that go to the next level and end up winning a championship. But what I was going to say, Brendan, is I don't want to suggest that just his mere presence helps the Cubs get over those hurdles and win the division or win a pennant or win a World Series. However, I'll leave this first segment with an anecdote from Jameson Taillon where he says Alex Bregman asked him, why didn't you win the division last year? Why didn't the Cubs win the division in 2025?
Is that what he said?
Taillon explains a little like, Milwaukee going 29-4 over a stretch didn't help, and, expanding that lead in July and August. But he ends the conversation by saying, well, we didn't have you. We didn't have Alex Bregman. So
there you go.
Straight from the horse's mouth, maybe his mere presence does help them get over that
That's
hurdle.
right.
We'll hit our first ad break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Pete Crow-Armstrong.
Okay, what if your Wi-Fi just worked? Smart, reliable, always one step ahead. And what if the price stayed the same for a full 5 years? That is the Xfinity 5-year price guarantee. Imagine Wi-Fi that keeps your home connected in perfect harmony, streaming the game in 4K, video calls without a glitch, gaming without lag, even when everyone's online at once. It finds and fixes issues before you even notice them, like Wi-Fi and a sixth sense. Here's the best part: no annual contracts, no hidden fees. Xfinity's best equipment is also included because a lot can change in 5 years. Championships are won, records are broken, dreams get bigger, but your Wi-Fi, it should stay fast, it should stay reliable, and the price should stay put. Lock in your price and unlock the possibilities with Xfinity. Learn more at Xfinity.com. Xfinity, imagine that. Select plans only and restrictions apply. Can you believe we're already 6 weeks into 2026? That's usually the point where routines start slipping a little bit. Honestly, that's exactly where Huel saved me. My days get chaotic fast. Mornings, they turn into skip breakfast. I'm running behind. I'm reading Alex Bregman articles during what I should be doing, eating breakfast. And that's where Huel's Black Edition ready to go drink comes in. I keep one on hand for mornings when I'm rushing out the door. It's got 35 grams of protein, 27 essential vitamins and minerals, no artificial sweeteners, gluten-free, and it's under $5, and it actually keeps me full for hours. Then at home, I use Huel Black Edition powder. That's my customizable option, thicker, blended, more fulfilling. I'll toss it in a blender with ice or fruit, and I'm hitting my protein goals without cooking or even thinking about it. Right now, get 15% off with my code, Cubs15, for new customers only. Huge thanks to Huel for supporting the show. If you're busy, this is an absolute game changer.
All right, Brendan, back with you. And I want to talk about Pete Crow-Armstrong. So it'll pair a little bit following the Alex Bregman discussion and some of that article with Ken Rosenthal. And one of the things they talk about in there is, his work, his conversations with PCA. But I think since this episode is about storylines, things to watch, I think naturally PCA is one of the biggest ones. We saw a massive year from him in 2025, really putting a ton together, especially in that first half that was absolutely explosive. And I think one of the key storylines, and this goes for a couple guys, but his chase rate certainly being one of them. Obviously, a lot was made of that. But in addition to that, how he fares against left-handed pitching. And I think, again, that goes for other guys, Michael Busch as well. And we could talk about that separately. But as we head into spring training here, things to watch for, I think, how PCA is adjusting and how he is reacting to the struggles that he had at times in 2025, despite putting up overall a huge year. That's got to be one of the top few storylines, I think, for the 2026 Cubs, because as we know, and we saw glimpses of it, if he puts it all together and maintains that consistency over the course of 162 games, along with being one of the best base runners in the league and the best defensive center fielder in the league, the sky is literally the limit for what his value can be.
Yeah, and PCA doesn't have to be chasing at league average rates. He can still chase and be aggressive. It's about fine tuning that balance between being over aggressive and being way, 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 way over aggressive. So if we look at this chart over time, you can see when things started to click for Pete. This chart shows his chase rate from a month to month basis last year. When he first started the season, he was chasing around 55% of his pitches. That slowly went down all the way up into about the All-Star break. And at his peak, he was whiffing around 40, or rather chasing around 40%. The league average is around 30%. So clearly he needs to make strides in improving on that chase rate. But he did show from a course month-to-month progress improvements in that chase. And then if you look at this next graph, you overlay his bat speed, so his conviction with his swing, you start noticing that as he started to chase less, that bat speed started to go up. It actually went up above league average, which coincided with his best chase rate of the year before July. So he had this pattern of chasing less and swinging fast, showing conviction that led to the power of 25 home runs in that first half. It's not to try to get Pete to the point where you're only chasing, at Alex Bregman's 15 to 20% clip. That's probably not going to happen. But if Pete can chase around a 35% to 40% clip on the month-to-month basis, and you reduce, let's say, 15 plate appearances where you're making weak contact or striking out, and you turn those into a few base hits, well, then your 324 weight on base average becomes 340, and you see the value that provides. It's not that much of a change, and I'm confident he can at least show signs of making that early on. We've seen him make adjustments several times now throughout his career.
Yeah, 100%. And I think overall, what, the Cubs are certainly hoping for is at least some more consistency throughout. 847 OPS before the All-Star break, 634 after. Obviously watching it, the disparity was very clear at times. The length of time he was sitting, waiting for that 30th home run, things like that.
But it wasn't due. I want to make this clear. The low production in the second half was not due to chasing more. Mm-hmm. So that's very important. You saw the success he had when he was still chasing at a very high rate. You can still chase. You can still be aggressive. You don't want to lose that innate nature. Some of those home runs he hit, those pitchers were like Vlad Guerrero-esque, right, hitting the dirt or above you. Yeah. So it is a delicate balance. He did not have poor production because he was chasing. It was manifested in other reasons as well.
Yeah. And pairing back to the Bregman conversation, one of the quotes from PCA in the Rosenthal piece, quote, "He's excited to see my on-base percentage go up and my swing rate go down. It's everything that everybody else probably wants to see, but the way he talks about it is really cool. It's a nerdy approach to hitting, but it's never overcomplicated." It almost kind of sounds like, was John Lester talking about Tommy Hotovy when he said that? Didn't he say several years ago that he is not an analytics guy, but if you can communicate it to him in a way that not a slight at you, but not like a bunch of charts and graphs he'll understand it.
It's fair.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it sort of sounds like what Pete's saying about Bregman. And it again, it's not to guarantee that having his presence is going to inherently make Pete better. But I think when you think about the way Bregman thinks about the game and the maturity that you have to put up the type of numbers and be the type of hitter that Alex Bregman is, taking a little bit of that for Pete, you can imagine how that would turn him into just an absolute monster of a player.
And the charts we show, these are not charts for baseball players. These are charts for us fans. This is public data. Players making changes have to rely on intuition and clear, obvious trends they can trace back to feel. So this is not like if I show Pete, hey, here's your chase rate from July to August. Look at that. Go change it. No, that's stupid.
So,
right?
Yeah. So let me ask you this, though, as we think about what Pete might be trying to do and some of the wisdom that Bregman might be imparting on him, is that the type of stuff that you expect a fan to be able to pick up on when we start seeing Pete in the cage or in some of these spring training games? Or is it just a mental approach as he's going up to the plate?
I think it's going to be a mental approach when he's going up to the plate. I mean, I'm forgetting who it was. There was a recent article within the past month, and he was talking about, it may have been related to Justin Turner actually, but they were talking about how some hitters relied on always being ready for every single pitch. Like if there was a fastball away, you still try to hit that.
Mhm.
And this one hitter, God, I forgot who it was saying he was only looking for one zone. And if it wasn't there, it wasn't there. But he was not
I mean, I don't think it's who you're talking, but if I remember correctly, I thought A-Rod did that throughout his career.
Maybe it was A-Rod, but I swear to God, regardless, I think maybe you see some of that, right? But this is the point I'm talking about to our first, 10 minutes of this conversation. I want to hear more about that. How interesting is that when you have Alex Bregman talking about, hey, I know how you can improve your chase OBP, and it's not this nerdy way. I want to hear about that. I want to see how this actually being translated.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But so, yeah, I think obviously that's a huge thing to keep an eye on, how PCA develops, the type of hitter he settles into being, as he continues to make these adjustments, the league continues to adjust to them. And, certainly that was one of the more interesting parts of 2025 is especially in the early going, you can sense like pitching staffs all of a sudden have to be like, hey, wait a minute, like this guy's popping home runs left and right. Like, not that everybody thought he was just a defensive player, but early in the going, it was like, this is their best hitter. We have to completely adjust what we're doing here.
I thought he was going to hit 40 home runs.
Yeah.
I mean, he got to 25 at the All-Star break. We're thinking crazy thoughts. We're thinking MVP thoughts, especially with him and Seiya. We were going nuts.
So let's keep on offensive storylines. And I mentioned it earlier, but I think sticking on the left-handed side of the ledger, I think Michael Busch, another, really big storyline. Firstly, how the Cubs and Craig Counsell structure this lineup. We saw him leading off a ton of the games when they were facing right-handed pitching. But we've also heard Craig Counsell, Brendan, talk about not wanting him to be a platoon guy and really getting that opportunity to grow against left-handed pitching. He was one of the Cubs' best hitters. He, showed up in the playoffs. I mean, this guy, the leaps that he's taken, just massive, especially from, where we come from when they make the trade in the first place. And I think one of the biggest storylines potentially for the Cubs in 2026 is if he does get that runway to learn and adjust against left-handed pitching in a serious, regular basis. If he can pull that off, even to somewhat of a close to league average clip, this is a monster of a hitter that the Cubs seem to have on their hands.
Yeah, I mean, the overall peripherals you see with Michael Busch, I mean, they stand out pretty clearly. There's right across the board, squared up rate, 96th percentile, chase rate, almost 80th percentile. If you like those numbers, he kind of fits the mold. I don't want to say surprised with Busch, but he's exceeded my expectations. I really thought Busch would come in as a league average, a slightly above league average hitter for a first baseman. I'm talking about 250, 260, 25 home runs, an average walk rate, have a 335, 345 WOBA. The standard for him has actually increased in my eyes because he's shown strides in being able to barrel up with consistency and being selective.
Yeah.
And so now that 40 home run ceiling that I thought was available and that he hit last year, I'm thinking, okay, how do you sustain that output? And how do you have a guy that's not going from, just a 360 weight on base average guy in some, but like being consistent month to month that you see guys like Bregman do. And so it goes back to like, how do you make this more consistent? How is Craig able to play him against lefties in a 650 plate appearance sample? I'm fascinated to learn more about that. And just, anecdotally watching him, I thought he always took good at-bats against lefties last year. I don't know if you and I were calling for it. I think we were, but I'm excited to see what that looks like. And it reminds me a lot, different times, different ages, but it reminds me of the discussion with Rizzo in 2013 or 2014, where the splits against lefties were not good. And all of a sudden, Rizzo developed and it was never a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and the St. Louis Cardinals never got that memo in the playoffs that switching in a lefty doesn't necessarily work. But yeah, before we hit our second ad break, like continuing on Busch, I think it is one of those things where a lot of fans want to see this. It was certainly one of the more frustrating things, I think, from the fans' perspective when he was being subbed out in the middle of games or not starting certain games just because it was a left-handed pitcher, when against righties, he was literally one of their best and most consistent hitters.
I mean, I think the pushback there was, well, Justin Turner did have some average production against lefties. He improved as the year went
toward the
along.
middle of the year. Yeah.
Your guy, Justin Turner.
Every time. We have more to say on Busch. So let's hit our second ad break here, and then we'll come back and we'll keep talking about Michael Busch.
Okay, is your home ready for the challenge? Because winter is here. Now is the time to schedule your Four Seasons furnace tune-up and make sure your heating system is running strong all season long. Thinking about a whole home generator, we've got you covered there too. At Four Seasons, we guarantee same-day installation for your heating, air conditioning, plumbing, sewer, and electric needs with no extra charge for nice weekends or holidays. Right now, save up to $4,000 on new furnaces and complete comfort systems. Furnaces start at just $39 a month. Furnace and AC combo start at $57 a month. And when you call today, you save an additional $50. Four Seasons, your trusted local experts for heating, air conditioning, plumbing, sewer, and electric. It has been serving the Chicagoland area for over 50 years. Chicagoland homeowners have trusted Four Seasons to keep their home safe, comfortable, and running smoothly. Visit fourseasonsheatingcooling.com for special offers and money-saving coupons. That is fourseasonsheatingcooling.com. Okay, Ray CDJR new vehicles are rolling in right now at Ray Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, and now is your chance to score big during the auto show sales event. Head over to Ray CDJR to Route 12 in Fox Lake and explore one of the Chicago area's largest inventories of new Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram vehicles. Right now, get 0% financing for 72 months on select new models, plus shop over 125 vehicles priced under $20,000. At Ray CDJR, their friendly team of brand experts guides you every step of the way, making your car buying experience simple and stress-free. And with Ray's price promise, there are no add-ons, no hidden fees ever. The price you see, that is the price you pay. It is that simple. They've been proudly serving the community since 1963, and they are the only team we recommend. Don't miss the auto show sales event going on now. Visit Ray CDJR at Route 12 in Fox Lake or online at raycdjr.com. That's raycdjr.com. Like yourself again.
All right, Brendan. Continuing on Michael Busch. I think I'm very intrigued to see him get more runway against left-handed pitchers. Now, when you look through like the month-to-months, but he had some months that were solid against lefties. Now, granted, this was like 15 plate appearances. Most of the months were 20 plate appearances or less. So what you want to read into that is up to you. But I think that's one of the things that I would guess a lot of fans are excited for is give him the shot. Like, it would be one thing if you had a big, gigantic sample that this just was not going to happen. But when you see the evolutions that he's made as a hitter overall and positioning himself into, the top 10 and top 5 in so many metrics of first baseman across the league, I think there's just going to be that desire to like, hey, let's let him try. Like, I think he might have the skills to put this together and at least be productive against left-handed pitching, even if he's not playing every start, but just not so much. And again, Craig Counsell has said that this is going to be the case, but just not so much like, oh, a lefty, we got to get Busch out of there, and especially last year, it put a lot of pressure on those bench guys, and Justin Turner being one of them, to really be hitting in the way that you brought them in to do, which Turner ended up doing toward the summer. But the start of the season wasn't so much like that. And that's where you're going to get a lot of that. Like, hey, man, we have like a, potentially budding top 10, top 5 first baseman in the league. Like, let's let him play instead of finding anybody else just because they may or may not have had good platoon splits against left-handed pitching 5 years ago.
I think there's an argument too, because Justin Turner is not on this team right now. Your second option, whether it be Tyler Austin or let's say Matt Shaw against lefties, you overlap what Busch could provide versus what those guys, Austin and Shaw, could provide. There's some overlap in expectations. With Justin Turner last year, there wasn't as much overlap against lefties. When he was signed for $6 million, you're thinking undoubtedly he will produce against lefties. So when the season started and he had Busch coming off a season in which he was successful in 24 with, over 20 home runs, but not this 34 home run pop we saw, obviously those at-bats against lefties are given to Justin Turner. That persisted. Then Justin Turner needed to get the playing time. That way, as the summer rolled along, those lefty availabilities would be more valuable for Justin Turner having that type of volume. That's not the case right now. So I think Craig Counsell's perspective of going through maybe some growing pains with lefties for the short term, for the long-term benefit, it makes sense because the alternative with Shaw or the alternative with Austin, at least to start the season, it's not undoubtedly better than what Busch could provide. But that could change as well as the season goes along.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, again, I think it's one of the more interesting things to keep an eye on. There's the potential for Busch, as he did from 2024 to 2025, to keep leveling up and keep adding more to his game. And, look, there's always the potential too that they give him more runway there and they decide, you know what, like maybe we did like that a little better.
Do we not talk about Busch enough? Do you think he's underrated by even, us, you and I? I mean, 34 home runs, 40 home runs with the playoffs.
We gave him a lot of credit. I don't think so. I mean, I know he was left off one of those like MLB Network stupid top 10 lists or whatever.
I don't care about those, you know. But the numbers last year, 261, 34 home runs, 3.5 WAR. Defense has gotten a lot better. He changed positions after coming over from the Dodgers, from third base to first base. He's worked his butt off. I think there was an expectation he would be good, but he's exceeded my expectations by a lot.
Oh,
dude.
yeah.
I mean, 21 home runs to 34 home runs at the first base position is what you get from a top 5 output.
Yeah.
And it's a reason why the Cubs can go out and spend on Bregman and go make these other splashy moves. Because Michael Busch is pre-arbitration, dude.
Yeah.
Like the value is so enormous.
Well, and that was one of the things I was going to say, is that it allows them to be in this position at all. Exactly. Of course, I mean, when a guy hits 34 home runs, 3.5 wins above replacement, like that's going to add value to your team, of course. But in terms of the structure, like this was a team that didn't have an answer at a major position. And, of course, Pete Alonso was just a free agent. Like there were, potentially options they could have explored, but would have cost money.
I mean, I wanted that option.
Yeah, they would have cost capital. Yeah. And so to make this trade and have a guy develop that, as you said, is still, cost controlled and someone they have under team control for years, it's a massive development for the organization.
Well, we talk about stacking good decisions. That's what Jed Hoyer always talks about, stacking good decisions and everything. This is one of those decisions 2 years ago that you're seeing have wide ranging effects. So you're able to trade, Zaire Hope, who was a touted top prospect, but a very young one. You take the risk on getting a guy with maybe more projection at the immediate onset of his career in Michael Busch. And I think the value they got from him exceeded their own models. So Jed was able to, in the front office, able to secure that position, stack that one good decision, and then at the same time, with Shaw last year, have the availability for him to play at third base to start the year, go through that fail process, right? Adjust. By the second half, Matt Shaw was one of the better offensive producing third basemen in the league and a Gold Glove candidate, right? Another good decision, shifting him to start the year at third base. And then by the time we roll along, now Alex Bregman becomes available. And because you now understand what you have in Busch, you understand what you have in Shaw, you're able to now spend that money on Bregman, and you have 3 guys on our roster that are projected to provide enormous value. Those are those like small decisions that we always go back and retrospectively evaluate. But that was one of the largest and most significant ones in Jed's tenure so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Continuing, I mean, you brought him up. I think a thing to watch, storyline to watch in this spring training, certainly how the Cubs utilize Matt Shaw and what we see from him. Again, like you can only glean so much from these spring training games, these spring training lineups, but just how they plan to utilize him when they find those opportunities for him to start, what positions he's playing. I think that's certainly one of the more interesting things to follow. I think the trade rumors may persist, but I'm operating as though this is the roster and that's not going to happen. Yeah. And I again, like how much we'll be able to tell just from spring training, it's going to be hard, but we've seen him at least taking some work in the outfield. And once we start these workouts in these games, if you're consistently seeing him playing different positions, getting in there at second base, maybe trying in the outfield, how often he's mixing in at third base, I think how Craig Counsell decides to utilize Matt Shaw now that he is solidified in this sort of super utility role, definitely one of the more interesting parts of this 2026 team. This is a guy who had a very big second half and was a great defender over at third base, a very valuable tool for the Cubs to use, and one that now they are not relying on to throw at a big time position like third base, and he better swim, otherwise the offense may sink, so to speak.
Yeah, what I'm looking for with Matt Shaw is the batting mechanics. We saw the changes from a 6-week rolling basis last year. Does he look a little bit different in game action? We've seen the videos. The leg stride looks different, but batting practice is batting practice. I want to see the game action, what he looks like in those games. I will remember and or point to how the Cubs used Nico Horner. I think it was 2020, maybe it was 2021, but they tried Nico in center field. He may have even played a game in spring training there. There was discussion about moving Nico to the outfield. Why? Well, you had Javi Baez at shortstop in the infield. There wasn't really an obvious hole for Nico Horner to fill, but the roster shaped out in a way where Nico is now your starting shortstop in 22. And then he moved over to second base because he signed Dansby. The rosters naturally work their way out. And God forbid something unexpected happened to the infield, Bregman, Dansby, Nico, then Shaw's value is obvious right there. But at the same time, if Shaw can show some defensive competency in right field, maybe play a little bit of left field to spell Happ every now and then you can use him as a way that the Cubs use their utility guys in the past, like Chris Bryant and Ben Zobrist. The value there is obvious. It's a matter of how good he looks defensively and how those offensive adjustments continue to change.
Yeah, so we'll see.
I saw Nick Castellanos got released. Frankly, don't have any interest in Castellanos. I loved him in 2019. But that was 7 years ago. I loved a lot of guys in 2019. They don't even play in the sport anymore. I don't think it's going to happen, Corey.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. So I think the Shaw stuff is interesting. Again, like however much we're able to kind of take away from how he's utilized in spring training. And look, he's also a guy that's made a ton of changes to his mechanics, his swing, everything he's doing. So I think he's a particularly interesting guy to watch just to see what he's doing on a given day and in a given period. Moving on, I think there are, in terms of things I'm watching for, I think there's a good number of guys on this team that they're pretty consistent. Like, I feel like we kind of know what we're getting. And
it's like the entire roster.
Yeah. I mean, like, with Nico, Dansby, Happ in particular, like they're kind of who they are. I don't know that anything you're going to see in spring training is going to be that interesting from them. They're pretty consistent in how they perform and who they are. And, obviously we saw, Nico take things to another level last year. He's in a contract year. So
people did, and maybe Nico's power might emerge. We've been talking about Nico Hoerner's power emerging for like 5 straight
I think
years.
he wants it to emerge.
Of course, he talked
He
about it.
sees that left center
I know.
basket at Wrigley, and he's like, I know I can hit line drives
Well,
there.
he's talked about the power value at Cubs convention and so on and so on and so on. The power did start to come out a little bit in the second half. He finished the year with 7 home runs. Is the power in him? The swing shape, if you want to call it that, it clusters with Luis Arias, Stephen Kwan. So like the swing does not lend to power. Now, if Nico were to hit for more power, it would result in a swing change. And I'm wondering, is it worth even tinkering at this point? I mean, you're hitting 300, you're above average, you have 4 to 5 wins every year. Kind of just like how he is. But all default to Nico if he ends up trying to make those changes.
Yeah. So, with those guys, I don't know that there's much to really pay attention to. I do think how Craig Counsell structures these lineups is something I'm particularly interested in seeing. And, again,
Do you have a preference at leadoff?
I was going to ask you that. I didn't hate Busch doing it. I really didn't against right-handed pitching. I know people will destroy us for saying this, but Ian Happ's he's a good on base guy. Like he's a really good on base guy. And if Michael Busch is going to hit 35 or 40 home runs, like maybe it would be better served in the middle of the lineup, but he did a really good job there. And, certainly in the playoffs too, like he was a guy that was pacing the lineup. So I don't have any problem with that. And then, I think if they're facing a lefty, I wouldn't mind seeing Nico up there. Yeah. I don't think I don't think that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I think those 3 guys in some respect are probably your best options. Yeah. I don't know. Is it crazy to hit Alex Bregman lead off against lefties?
Yeah.
Probably not, but.
Well, I think it is. I mean, you saw how.
Or probably I meant, yeah.
Yeah.
You want him hitting 2 through 4.
I mean, if he bats lead off, I don't care. I'm just thinking of like how Craig used the lineup last year. He's going to bat his top 3 hitters.
Yeah.
Top 3, right? So that means Nico against lefties, probably we're going to see to start the year bat leadoff. It means against righties, I imagine we could see Busch batting leadoff to your point, and that means you have to rely on trusting Seiya to be the guy who he was in the first half. Then you have, Bregman bat second maybe, and you kind of replace what we saw with Tucker. We could see that, but I think the lineup structure depends on how Seiya performs and how Pete performs. Those are your 3 or 4 hitters at various points of the year last year. And so if they do perform, then you can start, molding the lineup a little bit better, because at this offensive's peak, Ian Happ is not one of your top 4 best hitters. And as a result, he shouldn't bat in the top 4. But if Pete and Seiya are struggling, then he does become at times one of your best 4 hitters. So it's a balance Craig will have to adjust to.
Yeah, I like the idea of Nico hitting leadoff. I think there were times last year where, I know it was a constant frustration that he was, sometimes deeper in the lineup than a lot of people liked. And, when certain players would struggle, I think he's one of your better hitters. And I think his ability with his hit tool is one you want to see more often. I think having Nico involved with the top guys, either setting the table or, being there to turn over the lineup, whatever it is, like I think you want him getting a lot of plate appearances rather than, sticking him 6, 7 or something like that deeper down the lineup. I think that's what you want. Interesting too, now that we get into maybe some of the role guys, but I think how someone like Moisés Ballesteros performs also potentially changes this conversation. If he gets some run at DH and really shows you something and develops as an MLB hitter, that can change how you structure these lineups as well, given the way that the handedness is structured from these guys, especially now that you are switching. We don't have to call Alex Bregman their best hitter, but last year, your best hitter was, at least in the first half before the injuries, a left-handed hitter in Kyle Tucker, who was not a guy that was such an extreme splits guy like we talk about with like Busch or, certainly PCA, but he's better against right-handed pitching. So now Bregman being a righty and, putting Mo in the DH spot, it'll be interesting to see how that develops and if that changes the way Craig structures these lineups. Because that, to me, is one of the things that's the most interesting about this team. It's not always the case, but we've seen teams in the past, at least iterations of the Cubs, that were relatively similar, and it didn't really matter whether it was a lefty or a righty on the mound. They were going to roll out a pretty similar lineup, maybe with a couple of changes. This group last year, I mean, a pretty different look depending on who was on the mound, and for good reason.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing where Mo bats as well. Could he bat in the top 3 or top 4 at times? Yeah, I could see it. Do I expect it to start the year in the first 4 weeks? Absolutely not. I'd be shocked. We did see Craig use Mo a little bit more towards the back end of the season, and we saw him talk glowingly of Mo's bat. What I want to see from Ballesteros is the power. So we know the contact, the walks could be there. I want to see the power with Ballesteros. And there could be a scenario where if he starts performing very well, I know people want speed in the leadoff spot, but if he's seeing pitches, he's getting on base, he's having base hits, maybe in some instances, you start seeing Mo bat leadoff as well. There's also bench pieces that we're seeing on minor league deals. Chas McCormick, he's career rate against lefties, very good. I think he's a 364 weighted on base average of 137 WRC plus against lefties. He could be a guy that gets plate appearances against lefties in some fashion, a certain type of lefty. There's different ways you can get those at bats and change your way the lineup to where you can mold, your best 6 hitters getting the most at bats.
Yeah, I think some of those names and seeing how they build out the roster, as you mentioned, like Austin McCormick, maybe Dylan Carlson, if he ends up breaking camp with the team, and how they mix those guys into the fold. Because it was certainly a big part of the conversation last year, Brendan, when the bench was not particularly useful.
How do you feel about the outfield? Like
the 3 main guys?
The depth, part of me, in the back of my mind when I'm thinking what could go really wrong, and it is that outfield depth. And I'm a little surprised they haven't bolstered that more. I understand the logic of spending elsewhere, but I'm just surprised.
It's Matt Shaw.
Maybe it is Matt Shaw, right? Maybe a Gold Glove right fielder, Matt Shaw. But I'm just surprised they haven't gotten a more projectable major leaguer other than these minor league invites.
Yeah, I mean, look, they kind of dealt with it a little bit, when Tucker was missing time or at least just not as effective or needing to be the DH. They kind of confronted, Happ, PCA, and say starting out there every day, and that just being the group that you're rolling with. And I think you got to take your shots with some of these, lower risk signings. I think the logic is good. And, for some of the guys they had on the bench last year, the logic was good, looking at their platoon splits or just what they could bring in a limited role. It's a tough thing. It's similar to the bullpen. It's somewhat of a thankless job. You're not in a position to get that starting role, which is why you're being offered a bench role in the first place. And it's hard to come off the bench in a limited set of plate appearances and, hit your career best against only left-handed pitching when they call upon you. So I understand the not the concern, but at least wondering about the depth, what if something happens, et cetera, et cetera. But I like the depth moves they made. And I'm curious if they do actually give Matt Shaw some runway out there. And I think it's overall, Happ, PCA say as a very strong group to start. So
that would be my preference. If you had to pick all those guys and getting plate appearances in right field, undoubtedly, if Matt Shaw can show competency,
if he can do it,
dude, you talk about value, that boosts his value significantly. If he can do it at a competent level, right?
Listen, I mean, look, you've got Gold Glovers everywhere on the field. Not that necessarily makes playing, probably what would be right field at a windy Wrigley Field any easier, but we've seen crazier things, I suppose. And there's plenty of teams. I mean, we were just talking about them. I mean, the Phillies were trying to win a World Series, sticking Nick Castellanos in the outfield. Like, Shaw can do that. I'm sure of it. So we'll see. Keeping on some things, I think a name I want to at least mention too is how Miguel Amaya looks in spring training. I think, Carson Kelly was so good for this team in the early going of 2025. Obviously had to come back to earth a little bit. And I think as we go into 2026, expecting him to put up the numbers that we saw in those first couple months where, you were sort of jokingly tweeting, comparisons of his swing to Barry Bonds, right? Like it was a joke, but was it at the time? With some of those, like when a guy has a 1600 OPS, is it a joke?
I don't know. I mean, he saw
I
the
don't
video.
know.
You tell me,
Yeah. So I think you can't expect that, but he was obviously really good. And, they got some strong production from some of the other guys that they put back there. It was a very good position for the Cubs overall. But if you can have Miguel Amaya, when he got hurt last year, Miguel Amaya was in the middle. It was only 103 plate appearances, but he was in the middle of a season where he had 4 home runs, a 314 on base percentage, 281 average, a 124 WRC plus. He looked really strong at the plate. He had some big moments, had that big hit against the Dodgers. Like he had some big moments for this team. If he can carry a good bit of that load, keep Kelly fresh, they keep each other fresh, right? I think that's a potentially pretty big thing to watch if he can stay healthy. And I know you were talking about this the other day, but not just for the performance and, his effect on the team, but just for him, man. He's lost so much time to injury. He just deserves a nice, healthy season.
I was looking at Dylan Carlson's numbers and I looked at Miguel Amaya's numbers, and I saw Carlson got almost 2,000 plate appearances in his career so far. I'm like, wow, that's more than I thought. I looked at Miguel Amaya, 622 plate appearances in his career. This is a guy who's broken several bones. He's had surgeries. He's tripping over first base, locking his kneecap. The guy can't catch a break. And despite those injuries and those obstacles throughout his development, he's still showing signs of improvement in production. We talk about the 2024 adjustments with PCA. Miguel Amaya was part of that as well, going from a stride to no stride at the plate, which, by the way, he's still showing that no stride approach this spring. So, yeah, of course, I'm following Miguel Amaya just as closely as I am following Matt Shaw's development in right field, as closely as I'm following Pete Crow-Armstrong's chase rate, because Miguel Amaya, the value that you have to spend at the catcher position these days, there's a reason why Carson Kelly got 2 years at $6+ million. If Miguel Amaya can be healthy and show what some projections think he could be, that's an enormous value for years to come.
Yeah. All right. So last couple minutes here. I mean, I think there's a lot to watch. There's a lot of guys who can continue developing, take on bigger roles, continue their trajectory of, developing and becoming potential stars in this league and getting that notoriety. There's consistent guys. I think this is a really strong group. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Craig Counsell deploys some of the things that we've talked about, how he structures these lineups, how often is Moisés Ballesteros playing, how often is Matt Shaw playing, where is he playing, is Busch given that runway to try and learn and adjust against left-handed pitching. In the last minute here, I'll just ask you, like, as we go into spring training, you've said it's your favorite time of the year. You love watching this stuff.
I do.
Who's the player you're the most excited to see finally getting, video in the cage and watching them in these spring training games?
I would say my most exciting player to watch is Alex Bregman. I'm already watching the swing. I'm like enamored by the short, compact swing. I really am. So I can't get enough of it. Alex Bregman is my guy right now.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's an easy answer, but I'm going to say PCA. It's just such a fascinating thing. I mean, the potential that he has, and you think about the ways that he can grow his game, even as you said, keeping true to who he is, not coaching the hobby out of hobby, so to speak, right? but even in doing some small things, just the level that he can get to is extremely tantalizing to think about. So we will keep it with you. Don't forget to tune in to Luke, Joey throughout the week on the CHGO Cubs channels, the CHGO YouTube channel. Follow us on social. We'll keep you posted on everything. Brendan and I will be back with you next Thursday. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.